I would say is that the United States and China are destined for rivalry. They are the two most powerful countries in the world and have very different visions about how the world should work. So the United States is a democracy. China is an autocracy and certainly wants to promote that vision of governance. The United States treats Taiwan as an independent entity in everything but name. China considers it a renegade province. The United States wants one open global internet, and China wants every country to be able to censor the internet as it sees fit. Wired's February issue features excerpts from the book 2034, which imagines an all-out war between the United States and China that starts in the South China Sea. The South China Sea is an area of dispute because it's one of the world's major international waterways. Is this the most likely scenario for a US-China war? I think it's possible. I don't think it's the most likely scenario. China could very well beat the United States in a war, and I think that's especially likely if the war happens over Taiwan. Taiwan is only 100 miles from the Chinese mainland, so China could throw its entire military at the conflict. The Chinese military could hit targets on Taiwan without ever having to leave the Chinese mainland in the first place. The US military, of course, is coming from thousands of miles away. It would have to operate mainly from two bases that are on Okinawa, Japan. Those are the only two American military bases within 500 miles of Taiwan, and China actually now has missiles that could wipe those bases out in a sort of Pearl Harbor-style surprise attack. The United States would then have to fight from Guam, which is 1,800 miles away from Taiwan, and that's a huge problem because American fighter aircraft run out of gas after 500 miles. These are the kind of nightmare scenarios that keep American defense planners up at night, and frankly, for good reason.
Tremendous respect for President Xi, but we have a trade deficit. It is the largest deficit of any country in the history of our world. It's out of control.
On January 1st, 1979, the United States and the People's Republic of China officially established diplomatic relations. It was a turning point in global politics. For decades, the U.S. had viewed China with deep suspicion, while Beijing has always viewed America with deep mistrust, suspecting it of seeking to internally corrupt and transform China and the rest of the communist world. But as trade between them grew, many believed that economic cooperation would lead to a stable relationship. Today, that belief is crumbling. The world's two largest economies are locked in a tense rivalry, battling over trade, military dominance, and global influence. But here's the real question: does the U.S. have a China problem, or is it the other way around? The relationship between the United States and China has gone through multiple phases: diplomatic hostility, cautious cooperation, and now rising tensions. In 1949, China underwent a major transformation. Mao Zedong and the Communist Party established the People's Republic of China, PRC, after defeating the nationalist forces, who fled to Taiwan. The U.S. refused to recognize the new communist government and instead supported Taiwan as the legitimate Chinese government. For decades, Washington treated Beijing as an adversary, cutting off trade and imposing sanctions. Then, in the 1970s, a shift occurred. The Cold War was at its peak, and the U.S. saw an opportunity. By establishing ties with China, the U.S. hoped to counter the Soviet Union's influence. President Richard Nixon's visit to China in 1972 was groundbreaking. His visit was the first time a U.S. president had visited the People's Republic of China, or PRC, and his arrival in Beijing ended 25 years of no communication or diplomatic ties between the two countries. It also led to formal diplomatic relations in 1979, marking a new chapter. During the 1980s and 1990s, economic cooperation grew. U.S. businesses saw China as a huge opportunity: cheap labor, low manufacturing costs, and a massive market. Trade deals expanded, and by the early 2000s, China had become a key player in the global economy. But this economic boom came with consequences. By 2001, on December 11th, China joined the World Trade Organization, WTO, gaining access to global markets. U.S. manufacturers, once thriving, struggled to compete with China's lower costs. American factories shut down. Entire industries collapsed. Between 2001 and 2018, the U.S. lost an estimated 3.7 million jobs to China. The growing trade imbalance was impossible to ignore. At first, policymakers believed China would integrate into the global system and adopt democratic reforms, but that didn't happen. Instead, China strengthened its control over its economy, expanded its military, and pushed for more global influence. By the 2010s, tensions were rising again, and today, they've reached a boiling point. One of the biggest points of conflict between the U.S. and China is trade. For years, the U.S. has accused China of unfair practices, currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, and forced technology transfers. American companies operating in China have reported that they are often forced to share their innovations with local Chinese firms. The situation exploded in 2018 when the Trump administration launched a trade war, imposing tariffs on $350 billion worth of Chinese goods. China retaliated with its own tariffs on American products. The result? A massive disruption to global trade. Even after the initial phase of the trade war, tensions remained. In 2023, China accounted for roughly 17% of total U.S. imports, but many American businesses began shifting supply chains elsewhere, to countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico. Then came the battle over technology. The U.S. has taken drastic steps to curb China's tech influence. In 2022, Washington banned exports of advanced semiconductor technology to Chinese firms. This was a direct hit to China's ambitions in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and next-generation military technology. At the center of this battle is Huawei, China's biggest telecom giant. The U.S. has long accused Huawei of spying for the Chinese government, banning its equipment from American networks. Other Western nations followed suit. And then there's TikTok. The U.S. government has raised concerns over the app's data collection and ties to Beijing. Some lawmakers have even called for a complete ban. China sees these moves as economic warfare, an effort to block its rise as a technological superpower. As economic tensions escalate, so do military concerns. Beyond economics, military conflicts are fueling distrust between the U.S. and China. One major flashpoint is the South China Sea. China has built artificial islands, militarized key areas, and claimed vast territories that overlap with Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia. The U.S. has responded by increasing naval patrols and conducting freedom of navigation operations. This has led to tense standoffs between Chinese and American warships.
The rising tensions between the world's two most powerful countries, the United States and China, after several military close calls. In the most recent incident, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command says a Chinese warship came within 150 yards of an American destroyer above the Taiwan Strait. These images were captured by Canadian broadcaster Global News. Tonight, both China and the U.S. are standing their ground. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze reports tonight from the White House.
But the biggest risk of conflict? Taiwan. China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that must one day be reunified with the mainland, by force if necessary. The U.S. doesn't officially recognize Taiwan as an independent country, but it provides military support. In 2024, the U.S. approved $10 billion in arms sales to Taiwan, a move that angered Beijing. Chinese military drills near Taiwan have increased. In response, the U.S. has sent warships and fighter jets to the region. Many analysts warn that a military conflict over Taiwan is now more likely than ever. So, what happens next? Some experts believe the U.S. and China are in a Cold War 2.0, a global power struggle that could last decades. Others think economic ties will prevent outright war. What we know is that the U.S.-China rivalry is shaping the future of the world. And that brings us back to the original question, does the U.S. have a China problem? Or does China have a U.S. problem? The answer might depend on who you ask. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments.